welcome to episode 31 of Daniel Weekly. It struck me that I didn't explain that security problem that I released in curl 7.42.1 last week. I just mentioned it, that I did it. So I wanted to get back to that and say that in curl you can send custom headers, and you can do that in libcurl too. So you, especially then when doing HTTP, so you want to add whatever funny headers you and your server, your server understands, and your client, you want to send it in your client. And you can also kind of modify existing headers like user agent or referrer or other popular host or other common HTTP headers. So you do that with a libcurl option called HTTP headers. Not too hard to figure that out. Or you do it with a command line option in curl, the curl tool. Usually the shorter version is -H, and then you add headers and blah blah blah, and it goes off to the server. Nothing wrong with that, and all is fine and dandy. But if you're using a proxy, that is, if you're using HTTP proxy, you normally, when you do normal HTTP, you do connect to that proxy and you send the entire request to that proxy instead of the actual server, and then the proxy connects to the server, comes back to the proxy, and then responds to the client. Fine. And then in that case, you also send your custom headers, blah blah blah, to the proxy instead of the. But because in that case you don't actually communicate with the server, you only communicate with the proxy. But when you do, for example, HTTPS, that is TLS, through a proxy, because that's how you do it. You do it through. You first connect to the proxy and you do a HTTP connect request. So you send that request to the proxy, and the proxy then just it sets up a tunnel for curl to the server, and then you send the request through the tunnel really to the server. So you actually send first a request to the proxy to set up the tunnel, and then the request to the remote server. And in the HTTPS case, TLS, then that second request is TLS encrypted. So it is end-to-end encryption through the tunnel set up by the proxy. And if you use this custom HTTP headers option, it would send the same custom headers to both the proxy and the remote server, which is a problem that we actually figured out a while ago. So this functionality has been around forever, and a bunch of versions ago we added a function so you can separate them and provide two different lists, one for the proxy and one for the remote server. So you would get away from this problem. But it turns out, of course, that a lot of applications are still using that first one, the old one, the original one that's been around for 15 years. And if you do that, and if you, for example, send a sensitive, you may create your own authentication headers with your server, or you're sending other sensitive stuff that you want to have, for example, then in the encrypted TLS connection to your server. But by using this option, it would also send it to the proxy, and that would be in plain text, and the proxy would then read your sensitive data, or your sensitive headers at least. Bad. So in 7.42.1 and onwards, we now default separate those two lists. So if you have an application that requires that they are the same, that application will now break. So you need to switch it back in that case. But I think it's very, very rare that someone actually wants to send the same headers to both the proxy and the server. So I figured it was fairly safe. I'm sure there will be people that get upset by this, because it isn't very nice to change the default like this, but we did this as a fix for this security problem. So the most people will be happy with it because it fixes a potential problem for most people. There will be the rare exceptions, of course. Oh well, you can't satisfy everyone all the time. So I wanted to mention that I did mention it last week, right? That I was participating in an episode of the changelog podcast, and that went live this Friday, and it was about curl 17 years basically. Me and the two hosts, Adam and Jared, I believe they're called, we talked about curl and how much time I spent on it, how I've done it, a bit of a transition through different version control systems, different licenses, and so on. Kind of fun. I like talking about curl, and they're good hosts. They ask good questions, and I really enjoyed it. Listen to it if you're interested in more of that kind of meta issues around the curl, maintaining something like curl. I also learned something about in that episode, I got an idea about my video series, because we did a teaser for that episode, because we had some discussions around, actually offline, I believe, when we didn't record, and we discussed how I often get this, we have this kind of playful argument with wget, that we kind of poke on each other, that, oh, they do this, I do that, blah blah blah, and I kind of like to fuel the flames when it comes to that, because I think it's kind of fun. I mean, all in good jest and good humor. I know many wget guys, and they're great guys, so I'm not really against them, but I kind of like the childful, stupid games. So I get to hear a lot of arguments that you can do wget and a URL, but you cannot do curl and a URL and download that to a file without using -O. So actually, a long time ago, I made an option that you can actually put in your default file, and it'll work like that. And I mentioned that on the show, and we did a little teaser for the show about that. Anyway, I did that already. But it made me realize a little thing here. I'm going to, starting this episode, mention 1 or 2 or 3 command line options in curl and discuss what they do, how they work, why they're like that. And I have about 176 options to mention, so I can do this for quite a number of episodes going forward. I will never be bored, and you will be bored immediately. No, but since there are so many options, I figured maybe I could skip a few, or maybe I can do them in a random order, or whatever. If you have any particular ideas or questions about any particular command line options that I should focus on, or do first, or last, or skip, or add, or whatever, tell me. I did it like this episode. I did a man curl for a fairly recent version, I believe. I did it on my machine, so I think it's fairly updated. I have a Debian unstable here, so it runs 7.42.1 now, I think. Yeah, so here, these are the 3 first command line options in the curl mon page. Probably then not the most hidden ones, since they are the top ones in the man page, so people can easily find them, and that those you can kind of read those before you get bored and get confused by everything else in the man page. So I figure maybe I should start from the bottom. Let's do it like this now, because this episode 3 kind of starter options. First we have the $pound sign, or the hash sign. Is a hash sign these days, I guess. That letter, that letter. Long form --progress --bar. It only changes the progress meter for the curl tool. So instead of getting all those, the fancy numbers, transfer speed, this time has elapsed, this estimated time left, current speed, and blah blah blah. Instead of that regular progress meter, it changes the progress meter to just a bar with dots and stuff to just show it differently, really. Inspired by other tools, it's been around forever. It doesn't, it's not a very useful option. It just changes the progress bar. If you like that version better, use it. The next option, which is much more interesting, is in the short form --:, in the long form --next. That's a rather recent addition. It was added in 7.36.0, so it's been around for maybe a year. Who knows? Well, you know, you can always check that out. I can too. It doesn't matter. This marks on the command line that this is a next set of URL and options associated with that URL. And that is kind of cool, because if you want to do, for example, if you want to do HTTP post and a HTTP get in the same command line, that's the only way you can do that. You can type curl, you type whatever. For example, if you want to do post first, you do dash data and blah blah blah, data to send, and a URL. If you would add another URL on the command line, it would send the same post to that URL too, and another URL, blah blah blah. You can have any number of URLs. It would send the same post to all of them. And if you would do another dash data or dash D, it would just append that data to the previous data, yeah, to send. So you could use dash D many times, any number of times, and for each time it would append it in memory for the previous option and just merge all those into a huge chunk of data to send in the post. So but if you then want to do post and a get, you can't just add a URL because it would send post to that too. Then you use this option, dash colon. It kind of resets the state, and you do another. If you do then dash colon, you add a new URL then, and it would default to get by default. You could do capital I, and it would do a head instead. Or you can do a dash D and do a separate, different post to this new URL, or a set of URLs, because it starts a new set of URLs. So you could just use dash colon, and then of course you add any number of URLs again, kind of with a fresh set of data and options set for that part of the command line. And of course you can do it in a config file too. You don't have to do it on the command line. You can do it with the dash upper K option too. Very useful option, I would say. Kind of, it makes the command line slightly more complicated too, but hey, if you want to do funky scripts. And it makes sense sometimes to use the same command line to do several different operations, because it'll keep all the connections alive. So if you want to do a post and then a get, it makes sense to do it in a single command line, so that curl would keep the connection alive. So it'll be much faster to do it in a single command line than in two subsequent command lines, for example. And the third option for today, dash 0, as in the number 0. Just the long form of that would be dash HTTP 1.0, which then says it all. It tells curl to use HTTP 1.0 in the request. And it's slightly more than just changing the request header in HTTP. It also means that it'll default to a slightly different behavior internally, because in HTTP 1.0 there was no keep alive for HTTP, for example, and you didn't have chunked encoding, and there were some other things that the early HTTP didn't have that later HTTP has. So it just downgrades a couple of things internally. It is usually mostly, I would say, it's used mostly to, for example, force a server to not send the chunked encoding response back. So if you're having a problem with a server's particular chunked encoding response, which should be very rare, then you can switch this on and it won't send that back, since you're saying that you can't deal with that with the older version. That's about it about the three versions, command line options for this episode. Let's run a couple more next week. I wanted to mention in other news that I'm really progressing good with the HTTP2 multiplexing in curl. I've been posting on the mailing list, so if you want to track this, you read the mailing list. And I also posted a blog post about it the other day, detailing roughly where I'm at, but of course that is slightly behind. I'm slightly further than so right now. But to put it short, for you, multiplexing works pretty good. You can do. I've done 99 simultaneous parallel streams really fine, so that works. I I don't handle all the error cases right now properly, so if I hit the maximum number of streams, I don't deal with it properly, but that should be rare. So you can already now start at least trying out my code. It's still in the experimental branch, so it's not in the master yet. I'm not sure when I'm going to merge, but there are some outstanding issues that I want to deal with first. Primarily how I handle options and how to do HTTP2 by default, so that I don't mess around too much with an ordinary HTTP. And we'll see. I also wanted to mention that openssl 1.0.2 got into Debian Unstable, which is fun because that means that ALPN is supported. ALPN, you know, being the extension for TLS that you need for HTTP2. And I think this is good because it's suddenly then, wow, now we can see applications using OpenSSL go HTTP2 on Debian Unstable, and hopefully more distros and more applications can now start using ALPN properly, and that'll be fun. I hope that Debian will also enable then curl soon. I mean curl's HTTP2 support soon, so that it'll use ngHTTP2 and OpenSSL or GNU2LS to do ALPN and more HTTP2 fun for everyone, and more HTTP2 fun for everyone, because in this year's Google Summer of Code, the gsoc, there's a project for adding HTTP2 support to wget, and I'm reading the wget mailing list, of course, and I've already responded there and added my 2 cents on what I think he should focus on, and some minor experiences from my journey into adding HTTP2 support to curl. So hopefully that'll turn out into something great by the end of the summer, and more HTTP2 support in the world, and that can only be good and fun. And I am talking about HTTP2 tonight at the TCP/IP Geek Stockholm meetup at Spotify. So if you're going there, I'll see you then. That's it for this week. Another long episode because I'm a blabber and I can't stop. Tell me about some command line options to talk about next week. Other than that, I hope to have more HTTP2 fun multiplexing to do this coming week, and have something to say about that next week. I've been a bit slow on the Firefox front the last week or two, but there will be some movements there as well, I think. I'm also going to Whistler, Canada with Mozilla in June, just in case you happen to be there. I guess there aren't that many. I mean, people actually living in Whistler, Canada. Oh well. This was episode 31. I started this video series in September, so starting to get the hang of this. You think I should stop this episode now? Or should I just go on like this? Nah, I think I'll stop. See you.